new, previously secret recordings of Senator Ted Cruz discussing an explicit strategy to overthrow the election in advance of January 6th. So there's some stuff that's familiar here because we all lived through January 6th. What I have for you tonight is new. It's secret until tonight. It's exclusive. And it goes to the advanced plotting, specifically 4 days prior. So, airing for the first time tonight are tapes I'm about to play for you. They come on the heels of something that might be familiar. Other Ted Cruz recordings that we recently reported, which showed how he himself doubted that there was hard evidence that would win in court of Trump challenging the election. And no, Trump did lose all those court challenges. So when Cruz was saying that, it turned out that what he saw as weak evidence was weak evidence. Trump lost those cases. Cruz knew it. But by January, Mr. Cruz, Senator Cruz, was not only bending to Donald Trump's plan to vote against certifying the Biden win on the 6th. Senator Cruz was actively out plotting and selling a plan in advance, as these secret tapes tonight show. Cruz was talking to one of Trump's greatest backers in overthrowing the election, Fox host Maria Bartiromo. And if you're thinking, oh, does this all relate to everything we've been living through and the recent accountability? It does. We'll get to that. But what I'm going to play you first is how he was effectively privately briefing her on what he called a mechanism to force an overthrow or disruption of Biden's win by denying the certification. So when you listen to this tape right now, remember, at this time, 4 days out from the 6th, few people knew the lengths Donald Trump's allies planned to go on January 6th, as Cruz was planning out a key part of the plot.
I think that the country deserves to have a credible assessment of these claims and what the evidence shows. And the mechanism to try to force that is denying certification on the 6th.
Forcing this reassessment, as he so dryly put it, of Biden's actual win was for Cruz one step in a larger coup plot. And that's what the next tape I'm going to play for you shows. After the violence on January 6th, there was, of course, the ongoing process of trying to overthrow the election. Cruz, early in that day, technically right before the Capitol was breached, was one of 11 senators voting to deny the certification. I should mention the majority of Republican senators didn't go that far. But that's just one thing. Then there's step two, which you can hear yourself tonight. Again, we have evidence tonight. We're going to play it for you, and you can decide what you think of it. But in this newly exposed tape, Senator Cruz proclaims that the coup plotters would jump from denying the certification, which I showed you they tried to do, to step two, which they didn't reach, but here it is on tape. They would just seize power, he says, and overthrow the whole election. He literally explains it that way. Basically, that they would hijack the certification and then use their own made-up fake commission to declare that the Biden win was fraudulent, and then that would decide who's inaugurated. Quote, who's inaugurated. Now, it is rare to hear the endgame of the January 6 plotters confessed so plainly. Indeed, we heard one Trump official, Peter Navarro, talk about an aspect of this, the congressional sweep part, in public. We heard it on this program. It made news. It was a kind of a partial admission or confession. Now, this tape is Cruz talking in secret. Remember, this is where he doesn't think it's going to get out. He's just talking to someone who he sees as an ally in this cause, Maria Bartiromo, in advance, about overthrowing the race with this fake commission and using the claims of fraud, which, remember, on tape, Ted Cruz said were not standing up in court.
Who's deciding who gets inaugurated?
It would be the results of that commission and what they find. And if they found credible evidence of fraud that undermines confidence in the electoral results in any given state, they would report on that.
He admits it. You heard the question there. So who decides who gets inaugurated? That's what this is all about, because you have a certified winner. You have all of the courts having passed up any potential challenge to that. So at that point, it was President-elect Biden. And Cruz answers that this fake, made-up so-called commission that he and his Trump buddies were planning to try to create to bureaucratize a coup. That's what they were trying to do. That was his answer. That's how they would steal the race. and all the references to fraud and such, well, we know, A, he didn't believe in those. We already have that on tape. B, we know more importantly, the judges and the fact-finding we have in this country didn't find that there was that kind of fraud. And then 3, that's all just talk anyway, because they're literally trying to steal it for Trump. So all the words in the middle are just the words to get there. Now, I want to be clear about this, because we try to really go through and take stuff seriously with you. You can feel it in America right now. Some of this stuff is catching up with people. Now, there are also those who would look at, say, this tape with this plan and say, Ari, this sounds pretty far-fetched. I mean, this sounds unlikely to get anywhere. They might want to dismiss it. They might say to me, hey, Ari, this wasn't going to really happen. And we know it actually didn't happen. We didn't see a fake commission popped up to do this. But let me tell you this tonight. Underestimating authoritarian plans hatched at the highest levels of your government would be a mistake. This was hidden for a reason. They don't want you to know about it. They don't want you to take it seriously now. That is the democracy part. Then there's something else I want to share with you before we bring in our experts, and boy, do we have some good ones on hand for this exclusive here on The Beat tonight. But these Cruz tapes, they also reinforce something else, how this Republican who staked his campaign on stopping Donald Trump not only turned into a Trump endorser, which is typical in party politics. You know about primaries, and people often come back together. But no, the Cruz tapes show Senator Cruz turned into someone trying to overthrow an election that Donald Trump lost. And just as we know Cruz didn't believe there was actual election fraud in 2020 because he privately said so on tape, we also know how thoroughly he saw Trump's flaws because he publicly said so on tape.
What Donald does when he loses is he blames everybody else. It's never Donald's fault. Look, we need a commander-in-chief, not a Twitterer-in-chief. Donald, you're a sniveling coward. This man is a pathological liar. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. The man is utterly amoral. His reaction to everything is to throw a fit.
Cruz's stated concerns there about Trump were borne out in office, lying about elections. And while many forget this, even in the 2016 general election, it was Cruz who actually withheld direct support for Trump. Instead, he used that major convention platform to break with most Republicans who were telling their supporters to vote Trump. Instead, remember what Cruz said at the time. He didn't say vote Trump. Instead, to some boos, he said, vote your conscience.
Stand and speak and vote your conscience. Vote for candidates up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom and to be faithful to the Constitution.
The sounds you hear are Republicans on the floor who pretty swiftly, within a couple seconds, gathered that this wasn't ending with a vote Trump like most speeches. That's really how all conventions in both parties work. It ended with vote your conscience, which is not traditionally understood as like a long, fancy word for Trump. Cruz went from warning of all those dangers of Trump while trying to defeat him to then, once Trump was actually defeated in 2020, trying to literally help him steal the election. Overthrowing the loss, as I mentioned, with hardliners like Hawley, trying to abuse the certification and set up, now we learned tonight, this kind of fake commission. And this dissent also tells us a larger and more dangerous story tonight, because Ted Cruz isn't just some senator. Even if you've heard of him or his criticisms, or you think he's like the other senators, or there's been Republicans who've criticized him and he's very controversial, there's something else politically important about Ted Cruz. I'll do all the facts with you. We do the law, we do the tapes, but we'll also do the political realities. And that is that Ted Cruz was the runner-up in 2016. Remember all those candidates Trump beat, and over a dozen? He came in second. He had this kind of position of his plurality, and he could build on that. He could try to run again on his own platform. He had once warned not only about Trump, but about Trumpism, this danger to the nation, this idea that if you go down that path, you end up with a type of policy, politics, and leadership that, as he put it, is not how a commander-in-chief should ever act. But Ted Cruz concluded that, apparently, for him, politically, making common cause with these would-be authoritarians, with those wanting to steal the election, steal your vote, overthrow American democracy for the first time, that was what he needed to do, both being seen as a Jan 6 planner, which was the public part, the certification part, but also, as we see in these tapes, using his power, his mind, his knowledge of the system to try to quite literally overthrow the person the voters picked to be inaugurated. That was his quite literal mission. This should not be underestimated or minimized, and certainly not brushed into the history and swept under the rug if we haven't even collected the full facts of this history. And that's why what we on the beat are calling these Cruz tapes are actually so damning. Keep all of that in mind, including the he knew better history of 2016, when you hear him caught on tape now, airing on TV tonight, pushing this plot.
Who's deciding who gets inaugurated?
It would be the results of that commission and what they find. And if they found credible evidence of fraud that undermines confidence in the electoral results in any given state, they would report on that.
Ted Cruz and his Trump buddies' commission that they make up will decide who's inaugurated. And that shows something else that might be bad for Ted Cruz, because the Cruz tapes show that Senator Cruz broke the first rule of Coup Club, which is you don't talk about Coup Club, because this is still America. And I can tell you, and we have recent evidence of this, there are more of us for democracy in America than there are of them. So if you start talking openly about Coup Club, that ain't a left-right thing, thank goodness. You are going to be in that authoritarian minority where you probably belong. This is America. We don't have politicians stealing elections from voters. And we don't allow authoritarian, defamatory propaganda without consequences, as Fox and Mr. Carlson have been learning. Now, that network and Senator Cruz's office declined our request here on The Beat for comment on this tape and story. That offer remains open. If, having seen and heard this report, they want to further comment, we'll air that for you tomorrow. Our offer for Senator Cruz to join this program for a discussion remains open. He can come on here anytime. We can talk about that and other issues. But in a time of national reckoning, this kind of evidence speaks volumes.